Hello everyone, my name's Anton Chilton, CEO here at QAD, and I'm absolutely excited and delighted to bring you the second edition of our virtual ThoughtStream event, QAD Tomorrow. For those of you that were here for our first edition of QAD Tomorrow, you may recall we introduced our vision of the adaptive manufacturing enterprise. And that vision embodies all of the characteristics and behaviors that we observe being exhibited by those companies that are really thriving in these times of uncertainty, change, and disruption. And if you were with us, you might recall that there were 5 pillars to the adaptive manufacturing enterprise vision: integrated supplier management, connected supply chain, effective enterprise management, digital manufacturing, and complete customer management. In today's version of Tomorrow, we're going to double-click on 2 elements of the adaptive manufacturing enterprise vision: integrated supplier management and the connected supply chain. Because those 2 areas really deal with both the macro and the micro issues that manufacturers like you need to deal with every single day to keep your supply chain moving, to keep your manufacturing operations going. And I don't think the timing could ever be more relevant, as recent events like the grounding of the Ever Given ship in the Suez Canal illustrated. Blocking a global artery for supply with $9 billion worth of trade every single day, backing up behind that blockage for 6 days in a row. That had a huge effect on the global supply chain and on global manufacturers. At the same time, we know many of our customers today, especially in the automotive industry and the high-tech industry, are severely affected by the global shortage of microchips. Shutdowns during COVID left consumers at home and ordering electronic consumable goods in quantities that had never been seen before. At the same time, sluggish onward demand from the automotive market meant that manufacturers of chips were not necessarily prepared for the comeback and, of course, the spike in demand that was caused by these consumers being at home during that lockdown period. And so you get this double whammy effect, and now there's a shortage globally of those essential components for high-tech goods and today's connected cars. In a third example, weather has also played a part in supply chain interruptions. For example, one of our customers was telling me only a couple of weeks ago that the big freeze that they experienced in Texas recently and the demand for energy within the state meant that the gas line that Texas uses to supply gas and sell gas to neighboring cities in Mexico was shut down to divert that energy supply to local needs within the state. That had the knock-on effect of shutting down one of our customers' factories in Mexico, effectively halting production for almost a week. We've also seen the effects of the pandemic on the supply chain. And in the UK, early on, about a year ago, demand for baking flour increased by 92% over the prior year period. Now, the millers producing the flour, they could produce the raw material, but actually they couldn't find enough packages to put the flour in. In their normal supply chain, they were shipping most of their product in bulk, which was then going to distributors. But here, consumers were actually the source of demand, and they didn't have enough volume of the consumer-sized packages to get that flour distributed in time. So just another example of the uncertainty and the effects of the pandemic on the global supply network. In just the past 12 months alone, supply chains have been dramatically affected by a range of different incidents, from tariffs, through restrictions of movement caused by COVID lockdowns, labor shortages, and of course, weather phenomena. The sources of supply chain disruption, even without a pandemic, are many and varied. And more importantly than that, they're often almost impossible to predict. Now we know that we don't have to tell you, the manufacturing industry, about the challenges of managing issues within the supply chain. But we also know it's not just about the headline issues that everybody's aware of on a global basis. It's much more subtle than that. It's dealing with challenges on an ongoing basis, like the design of your supply network, the suppliers that make up that network, the selection of those, the onboarding of those, the ongoing monitoring and performance management of those suppliers, dealing with all the changes in global trade and transportation and documentation and everything that comes with that. All of these are challenges that you have to face on a daily basis and that are fraught with fragility, change, and uncertainty. And managing all of that is what today's edition of Tomorrow is all about. We're going to hear from customers who faced these real-world challenges and how they've responded. We'll have some subject matter experts talk about the different ways you can set up your supply chain strategies and your systems and your processes to deal effectively with this. And what we're going to talk about today, I think, can be best summed up by the words of Brian Ulster, General Manager for Third Party and Risk and Compliance for Dun & Bradstreet. The Suez Canal incident gives us yet another reason for business to invest in data and technology to create an agile, geographically dispersed supply chain that can quickly pivot during unexpected events. So I hope you enjoy today's session about tomorrow. To get us moving, I'm going to ask Carter Lloyds, our Chief Marketing Officer, to drill down into some of the details around integrated supply management, the risks and the challenges that you all face, and some of the ideas that our customers have for how you can deal with that.
Thank you, Anton, and thank you for joining us. Elon Musk has said, things move as fast as the least lucky and least competent supplier you know. That's scary. What's even scarier is the suppliers that you don't know. Ignorance is bliss until it's not. It's been said that risk is what's left over when you think you've thought of everything. In that context, luck is when that risk isn't realized. Just as hope is not a strategy, luck is not a tactic that you should rely on. 2020 was a tough year, but it was also an opportunity to stress test our supply chains. We can ignore the results, or we can learn from them. No doubt it was painful. Just because we survived the pandemic doesn't mean that our supply chains are healthy. It could simply be luck. To survive and thrive past the next disruption, supply chains must be efficient, agile, and resilient. In a recent Gartner survey of supply chain professionals, over the next 2 years, 89% said that they will invest to make their supply chain more agile. 87% said they will invest to make their supply chains more resilient. 60% admit that their supply chains have been more focused around efficiency rather than resiliency. After the event, we will invite you to take a diagnostic focused on integrated supplier management in the context of the greater supply chain. The diagnostic focuses on efficiency, agility, and resilience. The conventional view of the relationship of these various different characteristics is that there is a trade-off between each one, and this is best represented by freezing one. So let's assume that we freeze resilience and we look at the relationship between efficiency and agility. Given a manufacturer's current practices, many people feel that there is a one-to-one trade-off, that to give up some efficiency is required to gain agility, and vice versa. But the truth of the matter is, once you start to adopt best practices, you are able to simultaneously increase both efficiency and agility. You can push out the horizon. Not only can you push out that line, but you can start to bend it. So these traditional trade-offs become less persistent. Here's an example. Let's take strategic sourcing. So if you have a best practice around strategic sourcing that's scalable, you're able to increase efficiency. How do you do that? Well, you do it by having multiple suppliers compete for your business, thereby pushing down their cost. You can also increase agility because you can choose a supplier based on your needs at the current time, whether it be lead times or geographic location or quality. And finally, from a resilience perspective, you're more resilient because you no longer have any one point of failure within your supply chain. So please take this opportunity to take the diagnostic, to see where you are and where you want to go with respect to integrated supplier management. Just a 12-question survey, and I promise it will be worth your time. Okay, so let's talk about where we are and where we're going. Anton started off with a discussion of the adaptive manufacturing enterprise and a focus on integrated supplier management within the context of the greater supply chain. He shared with us some of the larger disruptions that we faced over the last year. Now we'd like to get very specific and talk about two manufacturing examples. The first is from an automotive startup in Europe, and the second is from a manufacturer of CNC machines out of Australia. Then we'll transition and talk to some subject matter experts in the area of supply chain who can talk about the commonality of those challenges, their root causes, and best practices for overcoming them. So let's move forward with INEOS Automotive, an exciting automotive company with a new niche product.
My name is Oliver Frille. I'm leading actually procurement, supply chain management, and supplier quality engineering in INEOS Automotive. INEOS is a petrochemical company. That's the group, that's the background, the company background of INEOS Automotive. INEOS Automotive is a part of that. And what we do, we actually engineer and later produce a real 4x4, which is actually a real 4x4, which is a tool for everyday use in harsh environments. My supplier network. You will find everything between an OEM, BMW for the engines. You will find very big-sized companies like ZF and Bosch. You will find very small companies focused on specific parts we need for the Grenadier. And you will find regionally actually covering pretty much the whole world. It is a huge challenge to manage the supply network, the global supply network. We are, as a team, we all start or came from different companies. As we are in the development and engineering phase, we're predominantly facing the challenges in and around the supplier tooling and supplier development costs. That's the current pressure we're seeing. Had the sourcing phase of finding the partners, identifying the partners, we were facing many times certain patterns and behaviors which were typical for the auto industry. We many times tried to overcome them to not work sequentially. We actually started to say we can do things faster, and we want to do them faster because we want to have a business case faster. I mean, the biggest challenges these days is still, as we're not in production, are around, I would say, reliability of partners, promises of the partners, which didn't happen or didn't turn out. They promised something, they were late and things like that, and they promised certain cost positions, which they actually do not deliver these days. Yeah, first product introduction, that's a challenge, because of course you do so many things first time. So take the returnable packaging, has to be designed first time. If you would be producing the third model of a certain kind, yeah, you can do carryover and count on your experience. So that's a challenge, and this type of challenge you find actually in the whole value chain, in the whole supply chain. Quality challenges are, of course, there. We're facing them in the different regions, or coming out, or being actually driven by our global setup. Supplier communications are very important because we have to rely on each other. There is an extremely high dependency from each other. So communication alignment on a high level when it comes to long-term strategies, all the way to parts availability, that is the span, and that has to be aligned. Otherwise, both companies will not be successful.
Let's talk about what we just heard. INEOS has a new 4x4. New product introduction is always challenging under the best of circumstances. Supplier selection, sourcing, quality, supplier communications, these are all critical challenges that many manufacturers need to face. And in particular, automotive supply chains are anything but simple. So to do it in that context is impressive. Now let's move on to some subject matter experts that can talk to us about the commonality of some of these challenges, the root causes, and best practices.
As you just heard from INEOS, they've expressed that new product introduction is a challenge they're facing today, which is not unheard of. New product introduction is on the top of the list of challenges our customers face, or as we say in quality, it's also known as NPI. There's actually a recent Gartner study that states that 45% of all product launches are not completed on schedule, and then 89% of those actually fail to meet their customer and internal targets. Some of the most concerning reasons for this failure to meet those customer requirements, things like product quality and supply chain problems. There is certainly an enormous amount of risk involved with all of these problems, as you can imagine, they lead to higher field failure rates. The current state of supply chain relationships has been for decades basically focused solely on cost. This has actually resulted in significant negative impacts on the supply chain and their end users. The good news is we are seeing a positive change in the mentality where supplier quality and delivery performance is being brought to the forefront. This would include areas of product sourcing, product onboarding, product performance, and ultimately the beneficial impacts these have on both quality and the financial objectives. Collaboration is definitely important in new product introduction, and it doesn't end there. In fact, it's more important during the entire development of the project. It's really a journey of creating a collaborative project while engaging the supplier throughout, from the beginning to the end. Quality and product design planning are key to the success, and furthermore, a collaborative environment where your customers and suppliers can interact as requirements change and develop is really our ultimate goal. As the supplier works through this journey, a product validation package is built, which results in the parts being supplied correctly the first time, on time. Addressing root cause and avoiding new product introduction failures is easily addressed in a quality management environment following best practices.
Their challenge grows together with their project. They have to make sure they find the best suppliers out there that provide them the best quality of their products. They have to source the parts from the suppliers according to their time frames, and they have to make sure that their industrialization works out perfectly for them because they have an SOP that they want to meet. Ineos Automotive was able to start on a clean slate. Other companies have existing processes, existing client relationships, existing industrialization efforts, but they need to digitize in order to get ahead of the game. The common goal is always cost reductions, reduced risk, full transparency, and audit-proof processes. If sourcing is done right, you not only get cost reductions, you get a compliant audit-proof workflow that you can follow up upon, and you can easily feed the terms and conditions that you've negotiated with your supplier into the ERP system and thus in the downstream processes. The companies using a digitized process report savings of around 10% versus the non-digitized process. And on top of that, they report efficiencies in their process of around 14%.
We can see the challenges are common. Critical processes have to be in place around enterprise quality, supplier management, and strategic sourcing. Digitization, automation, and collaboration are critical processes to have in place, while at the same time reducing errors. Now let's move to the other side of the world, to Anka, a manufacturer of CNC equipment, helping other manufacturers to manufacture.
Anka is a world-leading manufacturer of precision CNC grinding machines, and we provide solution to all the grinding application to various industries, starting from space to automotive and manufacturing. COVID-19, last 12 months, has been an extremely interesting and a challenging journey for Anka. As the pandemic set in, at the initial period of time, I think there is a lot of uncertainty and a lot of doom and gloom in the market. So we have to go back and readjust our production levels. Surprisingly, as the pandemic set in towards the end, in the last 4 or 5 months, to our surprise, the demand was going in the opposite direction. Actually, the demand was going up, and the supplies were a huge challenge. Our suppliers, many of our key suppliers, because of the lockdown, they were not able to go back and meet their committed dates. And obviously, the supply chain in terms of both the air freight and the sea freight, because of the reduced capacities, and this whole supply chain was in a little bit of a meltdown state. So actually we had a double whammy problem where the supplies were not coming in, but the demand was going up. So we would like to see a good rhythm from all our supplier base and ensure that all products and systems arrive on time so that we can go back and deliver the solution to our end customer.
We can see from ANCA dramatic spikes and troughs in supply and demand. This is tough, particularly in an environment with long lead times. It's even tougher when these are unsynchronized, when you have a spike in demand and a trough in supply, or vice versa. You could also hear their critical desire to maintain customer service levels that are impacted both up and downstream by the pandemic. Let's see what some of our subject matter experts have to say about this. And yes, we know COVID-19 is an extreme example, but what can we learn about planning for the unplannable?
How do we plan for the unplannable? It's a great question. You've got to look at the value of planning is in the planning process itself. It's not in the actual numbers. It's about the journey, so not so much the destination. What I mean by that is a company needs to have the ability to plan and rapidly replan. And when something comes along, such as a pandemic, to be able to use very agile methods to use what-if scenario analysis, to access data and be able to do risk and opportunity mitigation and exploitation based on new data sets. It's the planning process. If customers can operate in an agile way, they have access to good sets of data, and they can plan and rapidly replan and execute those plans and continually question their plans, then they will be agile and they will be able to navigate the disruption that we've seen in the last year. Managing demand and supply has always been a challenge to many manufacturers, but in rapidly changing and dynamic and disruptive environments, it becomes even more so. Well, traditionally, supply chain disconnect occurs when we have customer demand and we have supply management. Supply management may work off a long-term plan that originated at a point in time based on demand, but we're working in very rapidly changing times. And if there's a disconnect between demand and procurement, what happens is procurement starts to work with production in a pseudo independence from demand, and customer demand signals do not flow and are not reflected in everyday procurement decisions. If the supply side is not tightly linked into the demand side, it can lead to the excess of materials. It can even lead to production shortages and disruptions and expedited freight costs as we have to rush to get materials to production in time. When you're working with disconnected demand and supply, it's almost a feeling of isolation. It's you're making the best guess of what you have done in the past and what works and what you got penalized for last time. But it's almost like you're flying blind. You don't know exactly where you're going. Once you're in firefighting mode, it is difficult to break out of that way of working. However, a key piece of the puzzle is visibility. Supply chain visibility end to end. If you know what your demand is, you know what your production is and your distribution, your procurement will flow on. Now, yes, you're still going to have urgent and expedited orders, but these will be the exception, not the norm. And even if you're in firefighting mode, you're doing so knowing that you can see the end of the tunnel.
Long lead times is a common problem in all our customers. It's not the first time we hear about that. I think in order to solve or to try to avoid this problem, there are two key aspects that need to be considered. One is to have a good supplier selection process in order to make sure that your suppliers are not just going to deliver the right quality to you, but also they are going to have the right responsiveness. So this is key to select reliable suppliers. The second point is to make sure that your supplier understands correctly your requirements. So in this case, you need to make sure that you give to them the proper training to make sure that they understand the information they receive, that there is no confusion about what is requested, because in this situation there is no room for error. And then in case it's needed, even you could establish an acknowledgement process so they can acknowledge what you are requesting for, and there is no room for delays happening.
Lack of real-time information is a real problem. Firstly, it increases your administrative burden exponentially. Secondly, you're chasing documents all over the place, trying to find information. You've got records in faxes, information in emails, phone calls, and that's spread out all over the place. So thirdly, that makes record retention really difficult. And if you get audited and you don't have all your documentation correctly, then you could be facing serious penalties and fines. You can automate documentation production. You can automate compliance checks. It doesn't slow you down, and it means that every shipment leaving your facility is traveling with the correct paperwork to get it from point A to point B. Just-in-time production was seen as the absolute best practice for a very long time. And then an unforeseen circumstance, a global pandemic, came along, and that meant that companies could not get critical goods to their factories as they needed them. Now, of course, you can't really plan for a world pandemic, and you can't really plan for a once-in-a-100-year event. Many companies think they have a multi-carrier strategy, but they really don't. They have a strategy where they're using one carrier for domestic deliveries and another carrier for international delivery. And they don't look at those contracts year after year. With a true multi-carrier solution, you're asking the carrier to fight for your business on each and every shipment.
And so as we heard from our subject matter experts, like INEOS, there's a critical need for supplier communication. When you think about the diagram of a supply chain, it's very easy to focus on the nodes, the various different participants within the supply chain, but we oftentimes forget to think about the connections, the logistics between those nodes, and of course the context in which that occurs, which is different regulatory environments around the world. So what are the best practices we just heard? Well, moving from a transactional to a strategic relationship with a focus on collaborative planning, looking at landed cost optimization by working closely with transportation partners and proactively addressing duties and taxes, and leveraging real-time updates and automation can have a profound impact on supply chain performance. Before I transition back to Anton, let's just think about the supply chain one last time. And when you think about it, the flow that probably comes to mind first is that flow of materials, from raw materials, a hole in the ground, to a finished product in the hands of a happy customer. But it's slow. Just think about the transportation aspects, and it's really limited by the speed of a ship, of a train, of a truck, of an airplane. But there's an equally important flow, and that flow needs to be bidirectional. It's the flow of information, and it can move so much faster. It can move at the speed of light. Integrated supplier management is built on this rail of information flow. It is a critical component to the adaptive manufacturing enterprise, allowing you not just to survive disruption, but to thrive and to innovate for competitive advantage. Back to you, Anton.
Thank you, Carter, and thank you to all of our customers and to our subject matter experts for those fascinating insights into the challenges of today's supply chain. And of course, the strategies for dealing with them. And I particularly like the two threads of making sure that you've got capabilities around managing the information flow, so you've got visibility as to what's going on, and the actual flow of material through your supply chain. And as I said during the introduction, your ability and your capabilities around effectively managing supply chain performance are critical to your success and to your customers' experience. And to that end, I'll remind you that we did build a very powerful diagnostic tool that you can self-serve that I hope will give you some insight into where you are on being an adaptive manufacturing enterprise in the context of today's extremely complex, volatile, and fragile world of supplier management and supply chain management. Thank you all for watching and being a part of this second edition of QAD Tomorrow.